Okay. Hello, everyone. Let me mute this over here. All right. Welcome to the Pahokee live stream Q&A conversation. My name is Seth Gadsden. I'm with the Nickelodeon Theater in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm also director of the Indie Grits Film Festival, also in Columbia, South Carolina. It is with great pleasure that I am able to introduce to you some friends of mine and the incredible filmmakers Patrick and Ivete. And they're here to answer all of our questions about Pahokee. Before we get going, if you are having a good time and enjoying this conversation, please like the live stream. And if you have not seen this film, shame on you. But if you look in the description of the YouTube video, there will be a link there. You can also go to nickelodeon.org to get a promo code and get a discounted um, version of the film. So without further ado, let's start with, to get this conversation off nice and smooth, I want Patrick and Ivete to introduce themselves and tell me, how did you find Pahokee, and what was the primary early motivation for you to begin on this massive epic journey that you went on to make this film?
Sure. Hi. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and watching the film. My name is Patrick, and
I'm Ivete. I co-directed the film with Patrick, and I edited the film, among other things. And Patrick.
yeah, and I was a director and producer and photographer. So I first started going to Pahokee in the late around 1999. My mom had passed away, and my dad moved to West Palm Beach, Florida. So that kind of became our family's new home, Palm Beach County. I was not very interested in coastal Florida life, and I started driving around Central Florida and the Everglades. Um, when I was in high school, I had done a few projects a year with Habitat for Humanity in Appalachia. And I was very interested in finding places to volunteer, doing volunteer building projects, and also doing still photography. I always felt that volunteering in communities was really a wonderful way to meet people, earn trust, and make friends, and kind of get invited to take photographs. So I had started taking photographing Pahokee in the early 2000s, and I had worked on a number of volunteer projects there. I had always dreamed of making films, but the technology when I was in my mid-20s was really, really bad. We shot on Super 8 and mini VHS, and we would record films and not even know how to edit them because the technology was so unaffordable at that point. So in 2008, I met Ivete in Mexico, who is a filmmaker, and we started dating, and we started making art projects and short films together. So I brought her to Pahokee in about 2010, and kind of like tried to plant the seed that we should make a film there someday.
I guess you told my story already. No, but yeah, so we met in Mexico, and I was making fiction films with real people and real settings, and Patrick got me more into straight up doc, which, just capturing as opposed to staging. Um, I have nothing against staging, but Pahokee is captured. It's captured footage. And when he took me to Pahokee, I had already been studying film, an MFA in film in Austin, Texas, and I just felt very at home there. I was born in Brazil and raised in Mexico, and in Brazil we have a lot of sugarcane Pahokee, and we started by making a short film called The Send Off, which was just about prom, and then things progressed into other short films, Skip Day, The Rabbit Hunt, and finally the feature film Pahokee.
All right. Well, while we wait for some questions to start rolling in, how so you all have been in Pahokee making films for a number of years. You've made several shorts. You've worked with a lot of different youth, and working with youth is its own unique and privileged experience. And so I'm wondering, with these particular characters in Pahokee, the feature, how did you come about identifying these characters, and what was how did you find them, and what was it like working in particular with these characters?
Sure. Um, well, Nakiria was really the first young lady, the first protagonist we started filming with. We met her years earlier because her boyfriend was in the rabbit hunt and she was also in Skip Day. And her boyfriend had gone off to college, and we found her truly compelling because for most of her high school years, she didn't have a stable home. So her mom lived in Tampa, and her dad lived in a different town, and she had to move in her junior year 5 times. But she was a honor roll student, and her dream was to be the homecoming queen. So we found that to be a very compelling story. So we started with her.
Because we had, all the short films were with her ex-boyfriend, and then I really wanted to explore also the Hispanic and Latinx part of Pahokee. It's Pahokee is almost half Latin American people, and so I asked Nigeria if she could introduce me to some people, and we met different kids, but Hokabed was just and she really wanted to be valedictorian, and then she took us to the taco shop, and that was really great, and the food was really good. So we decided to follow her as well. I mean, we followed more kids than the four that you see in the film, but eventually the four that stayed, they were more engaged. They were giving us more video footage that they shot, and so then you can talk about Junior.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of films about high school, there are more adult protagonists, but we really wanted the film to be about kids. BJ, the football player, was important because his dad was also really compelling. He was a teacher. He is a teacher at the school, and he announced the football games. And their relationship is incredibly strong. So that was really important for us to follow. And then with Junior, we really wanted to follow an artist, to follow a musician, um, and to explore the beautiful father-daughter relationship. I think that was something that we hadn't seen in many films. So.
I mean, we often think about having kids young as like something very negative, but for Junior, it was it was something beautiful that gave him meaning, and we don't like to see things as like right or wrong. I think things are complex, and we saw that so much love from Junior, so much dedication to his daughter. So we thought he was a really compelling kid, and also a musician. And then BJ, um, the football narrative is. I mean, the thing about Pahokee is that a lot of people come to make media in general, the news or whatever, when something bad happens, like a shooting, or for football. And I think a lot of the people in the town were tired of the football narrative only. They were like, there's so much more. So we did find different kids doing different things to follow, but then of course we also were going to follow the football because it is one of the ways that the kids can go to college, and it's a very important way, and it's a place where everybody comes together. And we had met Big Show, who is the announcer of the football games, and his son BJ was about to be a senior. And BJ we really love because he's a leader, but he's not flashy, and he's very dedicated, to not only to the sport but also to his academics, and he was trying to balance all these things, and he had this really great relationship with his dad, who was always there for him. So then we followed him as well.
I have a quick note here. I've got two comments. One is they can't hear you, Ivete, and the other
Oh,
note
okay.
is it's hard to hear in general.
Sorry.
So maybe if we can turn the audio up or just speak up a little bit.
Okay.
See if we can't do a little better. We'll see.
Okay. Maybe we
So
get closer.
yeah, I think that might work. We'll see if we get some more comments. So with that in mind, I found all the characters really compelling, and I really found a Junior very compelling. He was some of my favorite shots in the film were with Junior, and which you talked about the love and that that joy there with him and his relationship with his daughter, and with a lot of these characters and a lot of times with films like this, lots of questions come up, and they don't necessarily get answered because you're finding this balance between this observational film and something that digs a little deeper. And so I'm curious how you went about, especially with somebody like Junior, knowing when, like, what to share and show, and what questions to kind of leave up unanswered. Like, how did you guys go about navigating that?
Yeah, I think I hope people can hear me, and if you can't, please tell us again. But I think with Junior, there was some difficulty filming with his baby's mom, and they were not together in the same place, most of the time. And so I think, some people ask like about the mom and how we made that decision, but I think it's we see single moms a lot in film, and the presence with Junior was so important, and we figured it was really important to see a single dad caring for their kid. He was with her a lot during that year. It was hard for him to concentrate in school, and so we decided to explore that relationship more than try to explain everything. I think that's part of our approach too, is that we don't try to explain everything. We let people have an experience with someone in the present moment.
Yeah, and the it's a very low budget film, so it was really just Ivete and I in the field. So there's no producer pressuring us to get this or that or watching our dailies. So what we really prioritize is protecting the kids and making sure that we're not overwhelming them, we're not distracting them from college, applying to college, and that we're providing some kind of value to the community. So I think no teens want adults hovering over them and feeling like they're monitored. So we really wait for these moments to emerge where the kids are really comfortable with us being there, and it just requires, like, we lived in Pahokee for 9 months. You just always have to be there, and a lot of the time we're not shooting, we're writing for grants, or we're volunteering, or I try and do a lot of photography, and
but it's also like the relationships that we have with people that we film. It's as much as about what you don't shoot as it is about what you shoot. And so there were moments where we were just going to be together with the cameras off, and those moments were very important. Like we we really wanted to respect to what the kids wanted to share and what they didn't. I think oftentimes documentarians feel like they have to push, to show everything. And I mean, people have private lives and they want to share some things and they don't want to share some things and they have reasons for it. So we wanted to be respectful of them as well.
That's actually a good leeway into another question that I've been thinking about when watching this film. When you work with youth, it's a privilege to work with youth, obviously, because they're allowing you in, and there's definitely a a relationship that's built there that's different than building it with adults or folks who can legally and for different. But anyway, so when you're working through the process and also at the end of the film, and you're editing this film and you're thinking about what your audience is, because audience is always like a big question around documentary. When you're filling out that core application and all those things, it's audience, audience, audience. Like, who's your audience? What's the impact, etc. But with this film, and I've worked with a lot of youth, and a lot of folks out there have as well. When you're making this film, where is it for you all with this particular film? When there's three things I'm thinking about: a film about these kids, a film with these kids, versus a film for these kids. And I wonder if you've thought where in there are you all, and are those things that you've been thinking about?
Definitely. I think with the short films, we spent a lot of time trying to create films that the community would be very proud of. That I think with the feature, we knew from the beginning of the school year that the school is in financial crisis and they weren't going to have a yearbook. So in a lot of ways, we wanted the film to feel like a yearbook for the kids. But we also thought a lot about, as filmmakers, making a film that didn't preach to the choir. So we didn't want to make a film that just played documentary film festivals and then went to, we absolutely love PBS and POV, but we wanted to make a film that could reach people who were Republicans, people who may never interact with communities of color. So as much as the film was a yearbook for these kids, we also wanted to make a film that had wide reception.
Yeah, and I think when you say, can you turn it off? Sorry. When you say with the kids, about the kids, and for the kids, I think it's everything, Like, you can't, if it was just about the kids, then that would be bad. But it has to be about, with, and for. And the about is the subject, but the collaboration is very important. And even though when you say for the kids, it could be, that could also make you restrain yourselves from showing the difficult parts, And that reminds me of when we did show the film to the kids for the first time, which is a question that people often ask us. So when we did show the kids the film for the first time, I talked to them and I said, you might not remember that we were there in this moment or that moment, and those moments are difficult. But the general public, when they see you go through something hard and do well after, it's inspiring and it makes you connect, So watch the film and we'll talk about it, And we only showed it to the kids, without the families, without friends, just them together, so that they had the space to digest those hard moments. Hard moments as a community as well, And then we could talk about it, and eventually they, they watched it. They were very moved by each other's stories, and and they they did want to share those moments, because it's for, with, and about them.
Awesome. Love that answer. So we actually have a question now. So this question is, how did you manage to share so many vulnerable moments in the film without invading the privacy of the people of Pahokee?
Sure. So I think, there's a lot of luck in filmmaking. I don't know how to describe it. So that we recorded 300 hours. So, I mean, that means that uh, two and 300 of that are kind of successful things that we recorded that were usable in a film. Um, I think that the the beautiful and vulnerable moments are when the protagonists are in their homes um, with with family members and just having very candid discussions. I can let Ivete. A lot of those are with Hoka bed, so I can let Ivete talk about that.
Well, I think the key ingredient for this is trust, and a good relationship, and people knowing us and knowing what we're about. And we had spent a lot of time in Pahokee already. Patrick had been going there for years before we even pulled the camera out. You know, he'd been photographing prom and things like that. And by the time we were making this film, like, so Patrick has long hair, and he's very recognizable. So everybody knew him, and then me, and and the people that we became very intimate with, the protagonists, um, really trusted us. And so for those moments to happen and for them to be vulnerable in front of the camera, that had to happen. They had to feel like we were part of their lives and part of their family, and comfortable with us. And then for the because Pahokee is very much about the collective and then the personal. And for the collective moments that were hard, I mean, honestly, people in town all knew us. So, so it was more about them sharing than trying to invade in in their privacy. If we ever felt like it was a moment to turn off the camera, we did.
Yeah, I think a good example of that was when the kids lost the football championship. There were a number of meetings in the gymnasium at the high school, and all of the news stations from West Palm Beach were in the parking lot with reporters saying,
stopping the cars.
Yeah, stopping the cars. And we didn't record any of that because we felt the community needed their space to grieve. So the way we communicated the loss of the championship was by recording the phone call, the hearing, and then playing that over scenery of Pahokee. So I think the way that you get these intimate scenes is that we spent a lot of time taking kids out to dinner or taking kids out to lunch, and but also a lot of time leaving them alone, so that our presence with them was something that wasn't forced. It was something that they wanted.
Something comfortable. Yeah.
We have another question, and it's actually in line with what I was going to follow up with, which is, so clearly a lot of this film is observational and verite in that sense, and a lot of the films that the both of you make are in that vein. But in this film, you have all these really beautiful moments with these cell phone testimonials, and so Can you describe what the process of allowing and empowering the kids to tell their own stories by shooting on their phones, how you incorporated those into the film, and from me, like, when was that a decision, and also was it prompted at all?
So, we love the kind of history of making direct cinema, but we didn't want to make a Weissman film in the sense that we never want to be seen as studying a community or look at a community like the high school as an institution and people interact. We're recording people interacting with the institution. So the cell phone videos were something that we had decided on before we started recording, and it was as a way to give the kids some agency, or some authorship in the film.
Yeah, and we really wanted the kids to be able to share things that they were feeling, but we also didn't want the format of an interview, because an interview, it's staged and performative, even though these videos are performative as well, for sure. But it's less dynamic. You're trying to find questions and you're pulling information out. And we really were curious about what the kids would share on their own and how they would do it, and like what they would do with the form, with the video that they had in their hands. So we decided to do it that way for both of those reasons. And then we gave them a little bit of instruction, but it was more like, just be close to the light, or not where there's any wind, and then share whatever you want. And so in a way, we're working with a restriction there, because we're not asking them to tell us what we want them to say so that we can tell the story in a certain way. But it's so much richer because they're providing us with what they want to say. And so we were very happy to work with that.
Great. I got another question here. Let's see. Did you always know that you would shoot over the course of a year? And at what point did the structure reveal itself, or how did you figure out that structure?
Yeah, we had tried to shoot several feature-length documentaries before this film that all failed. I mean, I don't know if it's failure, but we had spent 4 years in production of a previous film that we just could never end, and then it made it harder to edit. So we really wanted, with the short films, they all had a very concrete structure, like the day of prom, or the Monday after prom going to the beach, or a day rabbit hunting.
They were all a day.
Yeah, so we felt that the school year was a very natural. It had natural arcs. It was very relatable to people all over the world. Kids in France watch Pahokee, and they can really understand and see similarities and differences, and enjoy seeing what a prom, because they don't have prom. But we wanted to use the school year because it was just so relatable. So we knew we needed to end the film, because we didn't, we unfortunately we did not get many grants for this project.
Well, and also the school year in Pahokee is so crucial. The last year of high school is like a deciding moment of what's going to happen in the future. And so that was just like a pivotal moment, right? So that was why we even decided to do that as the structure of the film, and then having a natural end, which is the year ending. And I edit the films as well, so like I was telling Patrick when graduation was gonna happen, I was like, it better be good because it's the end. I don't care. And then Hokabet gave that amazing speech, which she didn't tell me she was gonna do.
Wow.
So then we were like, oh, I think we have an end. So.
That was really beautiful. That ending was amazing. So let's. I know that the shorts were received really well by international audiences, and I've never talked to either one of you about that, but I have my own thoughts as to why that might be, or it really intrigued me. So I'm curious if you could touch a little bit on international audiences and their reactions to Pahokee and what that's been like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, France really loved Pahokee. We had a theatrical release there. We've shown the film all over Brazil. I mean, I'm Brazilian and Mexican, so for me, when I make films, I'm always trying to make films that, in a way, are relatable to everyone culturally as well as socially, as well as different ways. So our films are not very dialogue heavy, even though Pahokee contains a lot of dialogue. But it's really important for me that the films are relatable, and I think that has happened across different countries. So in Brazil, it's done really well. We showed it in China, and Big Show flew to China to show the film, and they loved it. Um, there's, you know, there's so with Pahokee, the main relatable and I mean the feeling that everybody in the world can understand is this push to do better than your circumstances. This push to do better than your parents like to like your parents really want you to do better than them and you want to make them proud. I mean that is universal, you know. And so I think that every film we make has that has like a universal core thing that people can relate to, and then there's the particularities of the culture, right? Pahokee is also very unique, but it is like a rural area that doesn't get the attention it deserves. You know?
Yeah, but so the short films did very well, and I think that's because it's easier to program short films. Um, with Pahokee, it's the title doesn't make sense. I mean, it's a we really wanted to have the name of the town be the title, because Pahokee and all of that land is native land. It's Seminole land, and Pahokee it is the Seminole word for the Everglades. Um,
it means grassy waters.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful word, but we didn't. There are a lot of spoiler alerts. It's a film that if you were looking at a film program, you'd say, "Oh, Pahokee, weird. Well, that's a weird word." And
kids in high school.
Yeah, I don't want to see that. I want to see this film about Michael Jackson being a pedophile or what. It's. I mean, we purposefully made a film that what wasn't shocking or
we were not being sensationalist.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there's a pressure of that, especially in feature film, because there's the pressure to be commercial and sell, and yeah. With the shorts, it was easier to just be artistic and sensitive and kind.
Yeah.
And with the feature, then when you're doing that, it's you're competing against all the people who are not.
Yeah, there was one idea, which was the students rising above the sugarcane fields, and that's the photo on the poster, and that is the hypothesis of the film. Like, can these beautiful youth rise above this oppressive landscape? And it's like am I going to watch that, or am I going to watch Dr. Ruth talking about sex, or something with a celebrity in it? So it's a it's a difficult film to program, but it's a film that when you have an audience in seats and when you have high school kids in front of it, it's very powerful, and it draws different emotions out of every person who's in the theater.
I also think there's a misconception in the industry about observation or like direct cinema, and the lack of explaining or the lack of talking about things in films, and they think that it's not penetrable for audiences. And our experience has been that we've shown this film widely. I mean, we made it in a way that anybody can understand and anybody can get on board with these kids' lives. And the truth is that every time we show it, I mean, people love the film. They don't miss somebody, explaining everything to them.
Do you think some of that just also has to do with the protagonist you're putting on the screen? You know, a black girl Joy, a single father, other Latinx story. Like these are stories you just don't see on screen, and you just don't see that represented. So for international audiences and for students, and do you find that people are just responding to it being maybe a narrative that they don't get to see come out of the United States very often?
Yeah, I mean,
definitely. I think it's strange, but in France, there's just such a deep reception and understanding of films that don't answer all of the questions. And we really struggle in the United States with this film. If you look up Pahokee, there's got to be about 5 series and feature-length films that deal with football and the community, and every single one of those sizzle reels or sample the football players are walking onto the field in slow motion, and there's music, and there's drone shots of kids moving in slow motion into the rabbit fields, and that, unfortunately, when you do that, you're kind of imposing this, like the kids need to walk really slow so we can stare at them.
Music video fullness into something that's simply displayed is very elegant and beautiful already. But also, I think, like in France, for example, people were very sensitive to the fact that, like, listen, that you're showing the cheerleader, the football player, the drum person, like the person who wants to achieve in school. They're all these archetypes of high school, yet they're different because we've never seen the cheerleader who looks like Nigeria, and we've never followed that cheerleader, to be a beauty queen and all these things. We haven't seen this, and that's precisely what we wanted to do, was to say the faces of the United States of America are not what has been in the mainstream. These kids are American, and they need their space, in the broad culture. So that's very valuable, and also people here when we show the film, they're like, I've never seen my school, like something that looks like my school in a film, there's always like a predominantly white school with a few people of color. But I went to a school that was just like Pahokee. And so it's a very empowering thing, but it's also like a thing that the people, the decision makers in the industries are also not used to seeing. And I mean, I had somebody criticize our film and say, oh, they don't have strong characters. And I was like, you mean these 2 very strong girls are not important enough for you to follow them through this film? So there's a lot of, I mean, just like the kids have to break stereotypes, we have to break conventions and stereotypes with the film.
I've got a comment here. Personally, for others' commenter, the toughest moment in the film was the violence in the park. And he's asking, why did you decide to include that in the film?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and it's a very important conversation that we had. I think it's a reality, you know, it's a reality for the community and it's a reality for the kids. It was not the first time that we experienced that being there, but it was the first time that we were recording when it happened. And it's important to show what people have to overcome. It's important to show what people have to see in their daily lives, you know, and then go back to school. And we had that conversation with the people in the film as well when we were deciding to include that.
Yeah, I think so. Very often, people in coastal Florida, when they see stories about Pahokee, it's a reporter standing in front of a crime scene saying there was a shooting and that it was related to a gang. And I think it was very, very difficult to film and very difficult to edit.
Very emotional. I mean, we were crying. I mean, I cried editing that thing every
time. But it's very important for an audience to understand what a community goes through when there is a shooting and what that looks like. Because when it's just reported on the news that there was a shooting in Pahokee, then a person who's watching that who doesn't live there, every time they drive through Pahokee, they're looking at everybody who lives there like they're a shooter. Is that person going to shoot me? But when you see mothers running and protecting their children and young men running away from the scene, or people, you see that people are just playing basketball and trying to have a nice afternoon. I think when you see that scene, you realize how devastating it is for a community to experience that, and you hopefully start to feel some of the PTSD that the children and the parents have on Monday when they go back to work or they go back to school.
Or they try to go back to their park.
Yeah, and so the next weekend was prom, and the talk all week was, can we have prom? Can we go back to that park after the shooting? And so when the kids did go back, it took so much courage to overcome what had happened there the week before. So if you don't have that scene in the film, then you don't know that kids, when they're in school or when they're in that park, are going there with incredible courage to take back the space.
Yeah, when you make everything bright and sunny, then you're doing a disservice to the complexity of what people go through. I also would say, because I'm from Mexico, from a place that has been really affected by drug cartel violence, and experienced some shootings myself and had friends killed. Also, when I see the way that like media traditionally deals with that, and it's very much about the facts and the, you know, the person who got killed and why and all, like, I have never seen it shown just like the way it is, which is you're going through your life and then this happens, and then you have to first of all be there and experience it, and then you have to go back to normal life. And we try to portray it exactly that way. And with the editing too, I try to not have very little cutting, so you could really have a feeling of what it's like to be there and experience it in your own skin.
Yeah, one of the scenes that struck me from that scene was one of the officers kind of like clumsily just trying to put up that caution tape, and it really just struck home as like this, like you say, it's not this dramatic thing in the way that it's presented by the media, but there's also just people here that are trying to deal with this, and they have to deal with it, and there's all these different jobs and all these different roles that people have to play in a situation like that. You just don't understand it like that, and unless you see it in this kind of a direct cinema kind of way. How did the kids respond to it when you showed it to them?
Well, it was very visceral, especially for um, BJ's dad, Brian, the football announcer, because he was there and he had to gather he had two daughters who were in different parts of the park, and so he was just like panicked trying to find his girls while the shots were going off. I think all of the kids were they felt that that scene was important to people in the outside world understanding what they've gone through in their community. Like Ivete said, there were um, you know at least 7 shootings um, during that whole year of recording, uh, and so I think gun violence is a part of our country, and
That's the other thing, because when we show the film outside of the U.S. and in places where having guns is illegal, people are just like, "What? How did this happen?" And then we're like, "No, this happens." The thing is, we can't make a whole film about that because that's the stereotype of the community. So we try to just show it once so that people know that that happens, but concentrate on the kids and the families that are trying to have a normal life within that context.
Yeah, it seems that was there much of a struggle? Like the film ends on a really positive note, and there is a lot of hope and joy in this film, and it seems to strike a real balance between trauma, hope, positivity, tragedy. It, is that something that you all worked really hard to find a balance in, and where did you end up with that?
well,
Personally.
I think that, I mean, if we had recorded Gone the year before to record or the year after, it would have been a completely different film. I think it was an absolutely remarkable senior class. Um, and yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that's one of the things that had bothered me from films before I started making films myself was that, like, somehow things are, black or white, and we're, this is going to be a story of happiness and we're going to make it uplifting and all that. And the truth is that humans are complex and we tend to find joy even though we're going through hard things, being from Brazil, for example, samba music is very joyful, and a lot of the times it's like about really sad stuff, like not having food. so, so that was like, if you really stop and just listen and capture what's happening around you, that's what's bound to happen. You're gonna have joy, you're gonna have heartbreak, and that happened in that year, and that also having the different kids and their different storylines will just naturally show you that. Kokabed happened to have a very uplifting experience, but BJ had a more complex one because he achieved what he wanted to do, and then it got taken from him.
Where is your relationship currently with a lot of these protagonists? What's
So,
next for your relationships with them?
yeah, we had spent a lot of time in Pahokee. Uh, I mean, with all of the kids, we text with them. We are very active on Facebook with the kids. We they call us. You know, we've also, there are people who watch the film and want to get involved in the kids' lives, so we kind of vet people and find productive ways that generous people who see the film can get involved in the kids' lives
or in the community, make a positive impact. And the kids came to a lot of festivals with us. I mean, that was really important to us from the start. Like even with the shorts, as you remember, Seth, we like every time we had a premiere, we would fundraise and bring the kids. And for the feature, we set money aside precisely so that they can come to more than one festival with us and represent themselves. And so then they became really good at talking about the film. So sometimes they'll go on things by themselves. But we're really close. We're really close. We text all the time. Hokabet is doing super well at school. Nigeria has a really good job, and she's very independent. She just bought herself her first car, and like BJ's doing super well. He's like the captain, starting center in the football.
Yeah, and we made a new film in Florida, so we spent a lot of time with Junior, who was going to medical tech school and trying to hold down a job at a gas station. So we were Junior needs the most help out of all the kids, so we're most involved with him. But we see the kids every time we're in Florida. So
yeah, and they've become friends with each other more and more. So I think this is going to be a long-lasting relationship for everyone.
Awesome. Here's an interesting note. Do you have a message for high school seniors and students who are seeing the film right now, but are unfortunately missing their proms and graduations, etc.? Is that something that you've encountered recently?
Yeah, I mean that it's incredibly rough because you've spent 4 years dreaming about this day, but I think the only thing I can tell you is that I hope you're able to go to college, or maybe you have a year of work ahead of you where you're going to save up to go to college. But there's better times ahead. I really hated high school. I think I have one.
So did I.
Yeah, I have one friend from high school. So, kind of when we get out of high school is when we come into our own. Nakiria especially, she went to Tampa, and she at first she went to Tallahassee and was going to community college and working full time at Wendy's, and she was miserable. And so, a lot of times, being 18, being 17 is really hard because you're figuring out who you want to be, and you really have to get away from your parents, but because of what's happening, you're stuck at home. My only advice is to may sound silly, try new things that are not related to the computer, like cooking or gardening or woodworking or gymnastics.
I have to say too, because honestly, like being around the kids, we're both talking about how high school it sucked for us. Being around the kids as adults was a beautiful experience for us as well, and we were like, oh, we get to be these adults that we're not authority figures, so we could mentor them a little bit. And I'd say that the truth is that in high school, you're still, like he was saying, coming into your own. But in college, you really find yourself in a different way, and there might be ways for you to celebrate things like on your own terms later. So it might be rough right now, but maybe you'll find a way to have a big celebration later, or celebrate graduating college in like a crazy way, and it'll be your way, and you'll be much more independent. So maybe keep your eyes in the future and try to do something great.
Yeah. We're very. I feel terrible for kids. I mean, uh, there's a Facebook group where you can sponsor a Pahokee senior right now. So just finding ways to reach out to the world and ask for help right now. I mean, because you're not graduating, you might not be getting letters with $20 bills or $100 bills in them. But let the world know you exist, and yeah, don't go through this on your own.
Yeah, have a virtual graduation party. It's amazing because you get to get everybody who's all over the world.
Yeah, we've been having virtual baby showers.
Yeah, I'm about to have a baby, so.
But it will get better, I promise.
Well, we should probably start wrapping up. This has been a really great conversation. Just to head out on a future note, what's next for you guys other than this new life you're bringing into the world?
Yeah, we recorded a new film that's very different than Pahokee. Uh, I, I if you're feeling really good about Pahokee, I don't want to traumatize you with what our new film is about. But
no, it's not traumatizing.
Yeah, we'll be editing a film.
Yeah, we're working with a very dramatically different community still in Florida, and it's gonna be emotionally complex as well.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun too.
A lot of fun. So.
Yeah, but not Pahokee anymore because I think Pahokee has had enough of us there. So.
Thank you, Seth. Please support the Nickelodeon and the Indie Grits Film Festival. They really need your help. And joining the. Do you guys have a nonprofit that people can join or contribute to, Seth?
Oh yeah, it's the Nickelodeon Theater or Indie Grits. Hopefully we get to reopen these doors one day.
Yeah.
So.
Indie Grits is one of the best festivals in the U.S., and it's a city that's very affordable, and you can go there and be at the festival. Seth prioritizes making it super affordable, and it's just an amazing experience.
Yeah, and we're so happy to be partnering with Seth's theater and other theaters to keep their doors open because the truth is that these are the theaters that are showing the best films in U.S. and international cinema, and we can't lose that. So if we can support them, if we can have watch parties for their other films and then get together on Zoom and talk to each other, I mean, everything you can do to keep these doors open is going to be beneficial to the theaters and to culture in general. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that we haven't gotten a question in a little while, so probably should start heading out now.
Cool.
Maybe our other moderators can help us figure out what's next.
Goodbye, YouTube.
Bye, YouTube.
It's been fun.
It has. It's been a great conversation. I learned a lot.
Good.
I haven't.
We love Visit Films.
And Monuments.